Good evening, everyone. I will now call this council meeting to order at 5 p.m. on July 17th. We will start with a land acknowledgement statement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Moving on to approval of the agenda, are there any additions to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, the recommendation is that the agenda be approved as presented. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Winters, is there any discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you may declare at any time if one should arise. The minutes from the meeting held on July 3rd, the recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on July 3rd, 2024 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day? Councillor Coburn? Is there any discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Announcements. Does any member wish to make an announcement this evening? None. We have no public hearings. We have no delegations. However, for anyone interested in delegating to council for items on the agenda, regarding an item on the agenda, you shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. And to register, go to www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 603. And if it's for an item that is not on the agenda, you must register with the clerk by the Thursday preceding the meeting, and the same, www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations, or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729, extension 603. Consent agenda. Are there any items anyone would like to have pulled from the consent agenda? Councillor Coburn?
9.1.2, please.
Okay. Councillor Winters?
I'm thinking items 9.3.4 and 9.4.1, please.
Okay. Any others? Councillor Day?
I was just taking those two off my list. 9.3.1, 9.3.2, and 9.5.3.
Okay, and I wanted to pull 9.1.1. So the recommendation is that the Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less items 9.1.2, 9.3.4, 9.4.1, 9.3.1, 9.3.2, 9.5.3, and 9.1.1. Oh, and I also wanted 9.1.3. Glad that one. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Winters, is there any discussion? We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, so we will start with Kathy. You were first, 9.1.2.
So this is a resolution and also an invitation to meet with a rep from the Ontario Medical Association at the AMO conference in August. So two things. I would like to endorse the motion as presented in this correspondence. So it would read, we resolve that the Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs urge the province of Ontario to recognize the physician shortage in Georgian Bluffs and Ontario to fund healthcare appropriately. Now, so that's the end of that. We have lent support for this cause in the past. The clerk may correct me, but I believe this one's different because it is a joint AMO-OMA Ontario Medical Association resolution. Is that correct? So it's a little different. So I would just like to put that on the table that we would support that resolution as written.
Okay, do we want to vote on each of these as we go through them? Okay, so Councillor Coburn, you will move that one then? Could I have a seconder, Councillor Day? Any further discussion on that item? My only question is the second part of that you said was that there is something at the AMO conference. I'm not going to the AMO conference this year. I think Councillor Winter and Councillor Day are. Are you going, Councillor Coburn?
I think if you don't mind, we'll leave that as a separate issue and just vote on the resolution first, if that makes sense to the clerk.
Okay, I guess my only question was, is there anyone going to the conference that would be interested in attending for that?
Right, so that was the second part of what I had hoped to discuss, but sure, we can do that now. I'm going to the AMO conference. It doesn't really look like a delegation as such. It's certainly not with the ministry or any part of the government of Ontario. It's an invitation to meet with a rep who works for the Ontario Medical Association. So it's a little different than a delegation that we would think of at a conference, but I would like council's endorsement to attend on behalf of Georgian Bluffs. I think there are 10 or 15-minute time slots just to hear what OMA is proposing in terms of solutions, more to hear what their thoughts are, but just lend voice to the fact that we are in a shortage situation as well. And I'm happy to set that up, and anyone else who's at OMA is obviously invited to join me. With
Okay,
council
so
support.
does that, I guess further, does that need to be a separate recommendation, or it's just something that someone going to AMO can on their own attend? Doesn't need additional authorization from council, I guess is where I was going. So we only need that first part of it, and the second part is just for whoever's going and wants to set up for that. So if we're clear on what that first resolution is that we're doing, then I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay. And am I correct in saying that the second part is just Councillor Coburn wishes to do that when she's at AMO, she goes ahead and sets that up? Yeah. Okay. Then the next item, Councillor Winters, 9.3.4.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, further to Councillor Coburn, I mean, I read this part of it. The city of Belleville had the original motion. City of Petrolia supporting that, basically looking for fee increases for doctors' wages so that they can spend more time. We can get more doctors in the rural area. Wondered if this is something that council would support. I think it's worthwhile because there's lots of things that affect our doctor shortages in the community, and especially the rural community family doctors.
Okay, so you would move that motion, and we need a seconder, Councillor Coburn. Any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. 9.4.1.
Thank you again. So this is the report that Samantha has prepared about our financial quarterly update. And again, I thought my impression was when we talked about this, staff reports wouldn't be put in a consent agenda. They would actually have staff talk about reports that they've authored there. So I'd like Samantha to present her report is what I'm after on this one.
No problem at all. So through you, included in tonight's agenda is your January to June 2024 financial update. It has 3 appendices to it. The first is your line-by-line financials with comparators to budget. The second is an analysis of your tax arrears. The third one is something new we were trying for this one. So I'm open to comments on formatting if there's changes you would like made to it. But it is your 2024 capital and one-time projects analysis. So if we start at your financials being Appendix A, there are various comments made throughout the report. Overall, where we are sitting for the end of June, recognizing that all the numbers that are there are based on what has been physically paid. There are always timing delays around when a service may be provided by someone versus when we pay for the service. So if you were to look at the report, it does show that we have higher expenditures than we do for revenue coming in. So it would imply a deficit. This is not a true representation. This is normal for this time of year. You have not invoiced out your final tax bills. Interim tax bills are only based on 50% of prior year. So that incremental increase, the combined 6.77% that was included in your 2024 budget, isn't reflected in your revenue yet. Our final tax bills are being generated next week with installments due on August 24th and October 24th. What you also have that contributes to your higher expenditures is once budget is passed, we do the required journal entries and transfers within our bank accounts to move any budgeted reserve transfers to the actual reserve account. So that makes expenditures look higher because they're not prorated throughout the year. They are done all at once. We also have included in your expenditures are your capital and one-time projects, which we haven't reflected yet any money coming from reserves that would offset that. So your revenue is a little understated in that sense. Overall, we are comparable to where we had been in prior years when we're looking at this midway point throughout the years. Staff are actively monitoring and treasury staff have regular conversations with department heads around their spending and projections for future. When we are looking at Appendix B being the tax arrears analysis, again, it is comparable. It is slightly higher. We have sent out 64 letters to property owners advising them that their property taxes are in arrears, so we are trying to actively collect those. We did give them until June before any further actions would be taken. We are in the process right now of sending them to RealTax, who is our third-party service provider for the tax sale process. The hope and intent would always be to work with the property owner. Staff can enter into extension agreements to help alleviate some of that burden and spread it out. It is never our intention or want to sell a property on someone. That is unfortunately the last resort for collection.
Through the mayor, is that a fairly normal number for Georgian Bluffs, 64 households?
Over the last few years, yes, it has been unfortunately a bit more regular. Before COVID, it was lower. We didn't have them as frequently. And then when we are looking at the capital, there had been comments made previously that council was wanting some updates around the capital. So this is our first iteration of trying to show a progress bar as to where we've been and also highlighting some funds that you maybe have committed around a project. Again, we maybe haven't committed something, but it is something that we follow purchasing on, but the purchasing policy doesn't always have to come back to council once it's been approved through budget. So there may be different amounts within there that haven't been spent, but we're trying to give a visual as to how projects are projecting so that you find out throughout the year on those, opposed to when we roll around to the next year and you're looking at your annual budget and doing the reflection back on the year. If there are any specific questions, I'd be happy to.
Mr. Coburn?
Thank you, Samantha. I guess building on what Councillor Winters had said, I always find it helpful to have within the report itself a high level sort of executive summary. I know I reached out to you to say, you know, without going line by line, are there any anomalies? Are there any outliers? Are we on target and on all of our areas as one would expect? And you were great to get back to me and reassure me, but it would be nice just to have that as part of the report that accompanies this. And then I read this so long ago, I now can't remember where I saw it, but there was a line item on expenditures for, I think it was consulting fees. I think it was planning. Where would I find that again? Because it seemed to me that we were maybe reaching a point where we were maxing out on that one, but I'm not entirely sure until I take a look at where I saw it in the first place. Can you help me with that?
So through you, if you are looking at only the appendix and not the PDF version of the full agenda, within Appendix A, it was page 16 under our Planning and Development Department. And there is a expenditure around service contracts being 23,500 approximately. And this is support that we had received from JL Richards for in-house planning and agency planning support.
Sorry, which department is that? So I can zoom in on that quickly.
So it is Department 1300, Planning and Development. On bottom of page 16 of the appendix.
So do we feel as though we are at a point that we would have expected to be in terms of paying for consulting services within that planning and development area?
I can answer that. I know in the past we've relied heavily on JL Richards for support, and over the last 6 months, I have really not used them as much as we have been used in the past. The plan is to actually phase out that planning assistance that they provide right now and just have them continue to focus on the official plan project that they're currently working on. So in terms of a budget, I do not anticipate that the budget will increase much more than what we have before us right now.
Thank you.
Councillor Coburn, I'm wondering if you're looking at the planning service contracts or just below that, the special projects, which also falls under planning.
Just looking at.
Okay, so the 50,637.14, that is substantially over what we're showing for budget in previous year. It's perhaps more of a question than the 23.5.
Sorry about that. So for the special projects line, it's actually that covers the community improvement plan and the official plan 5-year update. And both of those projects are nearing completion. I know we are over budget on the official plan update. There's been a lot of changes legislatively that our consultants have had to review and then combine into the official plan update. And the community improvement plan budget, I believe, is pretty much on track. And we're about 80% complete.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Winters.
I've got a couple there through you to Sam. I mean, there's a comment and we don't want to look like bad partners here, but Southwest Peninsula has an invoice to say anything for waters contracts. Says here that you're reaching out. Have you received a response from them?
Through, yes, we did receive earlier this week the invoices for the first half of the year from January to June. So those efforts did come to fruition.
A couple more small ones here. Just one little notation on page 13 regarding B234, the Kubota tractor. Interesting notation. I get that it was scheduled for replacement. Not that long ago, we were told we were going to potentially keep it and put it into recreation and property. So we're told that, we're spending a lot of money on things just because they're old, but we're also told as council that they're going to maybe be transferred to another department, right? So we just got to be cautious in the wording that we use there. I know you may not have been able or privy to some of that information, but that one stuck out in my head when I read that. And then the other one, I was going to bring it up later, but it kind of falls into here as revenue as well. A year ago, we approved surplusing a bunch of scrap steel that had come into the landfill and was stored there. Is there any update on where that is at the moment? I don't see significant revenue from a scrap steel surplus that was approved by council here.
So through you, I believe that is still on the staff outstanding council direction list that has not been completed at this time, but I stand to be corrected.
Because remember, I'm in the private sector, so time is money, right? So that's where I focus on things. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So I did have one to do with page 4, the OMP funding. It's showing 878,700 and last year, but only 443,456 received this year. Does that come in two separate amounts, or are we that much lower this year on what we're receiving?
That is paid to us in 4 installments throughout the year. So we have only received the first 2 installments to date.
That answers that very well then. And page 14, it caught my eye, reserves for the tennis court and the boat launch. Is that something we should take a look at when we're looking at budget next year as to what improvements we could do at both of those places utilizing reserve funds that are there? Is that something we can just kind of target to make sure that we pick up on that and don't forget it when we're going through there? Because I think work could be done in both of those places to enhance them. And if we've got the reserve funds, it doesn't make sense to leave them just totally sitting there.
So through you, staff are currently working on the reserve that went at, or on the 2025 budget, not the reserve, sorry, on the 2025 budget. So when Treasury is having departmental meetings with each department about their next year budget requests, I can put that little bug in the department's ear to look at maybe doing some enhancements around those properties.
Okay, perfect, good, okay. So if there are no other comments or questions on that, then we will need a motion to receive that report as presented for information. Okay. Councillor Winters and Councillor Day. Any other discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, next item is Councillor Day, 9.3.1.
9.3.1 is, hang on one second, I've got 9.1.3 called up right now. 9.3.1 is from the city of Brantford, and it's calling for support for the decision of the Ontario Energy Board to end the gas pipe subsidy. And this goes along with the ideas that natural gas is no longer the cheapest way to heat homes. Heat pumps are the most effective at the moment and lower in cost. And the decision is at risk of being overturned. So this is a resolution to support the ending of the gas pipe subsidy, as suggested by the OEB, the Ontario Energy Board. Like Brantford, this resolution matches their climate goals and it matches our climate goals as well. So I would like to suggest endorsing this resolution.
Okay, and you would move that motion? I'm looking to the clerk on this one. When we're simply endorsing someone else's resolution, we need a mover and a seconder and direction. Right. I knew there was something about that. Okay, so your motion would be a direction to staff to support that. Okay. And a seconder on that one, please. Councillor Coburn. Any other discussion on it? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. 9.3.2.
I believe that is also me.
Yes.
I more have a question here as opposed to wanting to endorse everything that comes up. I was just curious if anyone on staff would be able to speak to whether or not bioresin as a road treatment, possibly more environmentally friendly and effective road treatment had ever been available in our area, just to increase our knowledge of it and see if there's something I could learn.
So when I read that one, I had to go look to figure out exactly what bioresin was. What I would see if we were going to support, and I'm not against it, I think it makes for the environment and climate change maybe makes more sense, but it's going to increase our costs for roads substantially. And we would need to be aware of that moving forward, that our roads budget is only going to be half or less than what it needs to be if we're looking at going to something like that. So maybe we need a report coming back how that will affect us. I'm not against going that way with the plant idea for sustainability, but I think there's a huge investment in before we get to that point of being able to do it. Councillor Day.
To clarify, I wasn't suggesting going in that direction. I was just trying to understand if the option was even available in Georgian Bluffs at this point in time.
I can see Councillor Winters shaking his head.
I don't believe it's an option yet in our area. It would likely be more of the urban centers that have the ability to bring on the product and modify their plants. I think it is something worthwhile to pay attention to, but it'll be interesting what their findings are based on their study that they're doing. But currently, I would say it's not available.
So then back to you, Councillor Day. What would you like to receive from staff then for a report, or what are you looking for on this one?
I think I just received what I was looking for, a little bit of an update about if we had heard of bioresin and if it was available in our area, just to keep a dialogue open about possibilities in road management as we go forward. So nothing specific tonight, just looking to continue the dialogue.
Okay, thank you. So we don't need a motion on that one, or we just receive it? Okay, so we receive for information. I need a mover and seconder to do that. Okay. Councillor Day, you will move that one. Councillor Winters, there's no further discussion. I will call the vote. All in favor. And that is carried. I think we're still with you, Councillor Day, on 9.5.3.
That is the Oxenden water report. And I have a suspicion, but I just wanted to see if I was correct in assuming that the higher than daily average water flows in 2024 were due to the water leak, or if there were other causes for that substantial increase in usage or water loss to the system.
Michael, go ahead.
Thank you. I can speak briefly to that. I do know that we do have had, I should say, a substantial water leak in our system in that area. And Aqua and the township are working diligently to identify the leaks and eliminate them where we find them. So I would imagine that would have been accounting for at least a good portion of the increased water usage.
If I may, maybe not correct or proper timing, but that system is kind of unique because it has a valve meter right at the town limits before it enters Georgian Bluffs. And at one time it had the ability to send you daily water meter readings. So because Georgian Bluffs pays based on the water that goes through that meter, not by the water that goes through the houses. So it is very, very important that we pay attention to that water loss in a timely manner. But it is, yeah, that one is unique and it has the ability to catch those pretty quick.
I can confirm there was a leak that was fixed in Oxenden itself, but it looked like the water usage or the water flow had increased for a few months before that leak was found or fixed.
Okay, so again, motion to receive that report. So mover and seconder, please. Councillor Day, Councillor Coburn. There's no further discussion. I will call the vote. All in favor. Sorry, Councillor Thompson, there's this time delay, and by the time you put your hand up, I've already seen people here. Thank you.
I'm trying to put my hand up a little earlier to anticipate when you're going to ask.
Okay. 9.1.1. Have we gone through all the ones? Oh, sorry. I thought I'd ticked off all the ones for you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I hope I called it. I intended to. 9.1.3. The annual childcare and EC Appreciation Day. I believe I called this one last year as well, and it feels like a very simple thing to do to acknowledge the work of these important staff in our communities. Raising some of those years from 0 to 6 are so important in child development, and it doesn't have to cost money, but just to put up some social media and something perhaps on our sign. So I would like to do that again in 2024 if council is amenable. I move that we acknowledge annual childcare and EC Appreciation Day.
Thank you. I actually had that one on my list too, so I think it's very important. Could I have a mover on that one? Or a seconder, sorry, Councillor Day moved. I'm going to go to Councillor Thompson and assume he's going to put his hand up on this one. Thank you. Any further discussion on this one? I will call the vote. All in favor. And the last one that I pulled was the 9.1.1, and I know our CAO has already been looking at staff who would attend that. I just wanted to make council aware of that invitation to Walker for their summer barbecue, and I think we should funnel all acceptances through one person. And I know Niall was somewhat looking after that with staff, so who on staff would take that on, if anybody from council, so clerk's department. So if anyone's interested in attending that, just let staff know. And I don't think we need a mover and seconder on that one at all. That was just for information. Okay, I think we've got through consent agenda. So no correspondence, committee reports. Get on to this one. To start with, does any member wish to pull an item from the committee of the whole report that is in front of us? Seeing none, the recommendation is that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on July 10th, 2024 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2024-069 to COW 2024-075. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters? Councillor Day? Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Sorry, where are we on to now? Bylaws is next? Sorry. So 13.1.1 under staff reports. Sorry, just let me catch up here. The recommendation is that council hereby approves the waiving of bylaw 2019-047 purchasing policy, and that council hereby authorizes the purchase of an identical 48 niche columbarium unit from Nelson Granite Limited for Mount Pleasant Cemetery under the budgeted cost of $30,000 inclusive of HST. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day? Councillor Thompson? And I'll turn it over to the clerk for comments on this.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. So the report that you have in front of you is recommending a single source purchase of the second columbarium at Mount Pleasant. The report does outline the rationale for that, including existing administrative processes that would continue to exist with the relationship that is existing with Nelson Granite. It also is under the budgeted amount for the year. And then the other reason is that in terms of a timeline and ordering, if we were to do the RFP this late in the year, we probably wouldn't see the columbarium installed until 2025, likely in the spring. And so we were hoping to potentially start generating some revenue a little bit sooner than that if council would support the single source purchase. And it would ensure that uniformity amongst those columbariums exists in Mount Pleasant Cemetery. But I am happy to answer any questions that council may have about the report.
Okay, is there any questions or any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next item is the 2024 Concours d'Elegance Special Events Permit. Whereas special events bylaw 47-2013 requires approval of council for events consisting of 1,000 people or more prior to issuance of a special events permit. Now, therefore, the issuance of special events permit 4-2024 for the 2024 Concours d'Elegance event is conditionally approved pending issuance of a right-of-way occupancy permit and proof of appropriate insurance coverage. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Coburn. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? and that is carried. Other bylaws, bylaw 2024-042. That bylaw 2024-042 being a bylaw to authorize a municipal funding agreement on the Canada Community Building Fund with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn? Councillor Winters? Is there any discussion on this item? There's one I was thinking, it said in the report, the mayor and treasurer should sign, but we had it mayor and clerk. And I don't remember what, I don't think that was this one though. I will call the vote on this one. All in favor? That is carried. There is one report though where it says that, and it might have been that. I'll bring it up with staff later. Yeah, it does say in the agreement that it's, I'm not finding it. It says in the agreement, mayor and treasurer, but we have mayor and clerk to sign. So we don't need to make a change there.
Not to speak on behalf of our clerk's department, but we can make that administrative change prior to its signing.
Okay. Perfect, thank you. We are on to new business, the invasive species program. As provided by Councillor Rick Winters. Rick, since this is one you brought forward, did you want to read the recommendation?
Well done, well done. Let staff be directed to bring back a report on the extent and nature of invasive species and noxious weeds in the township and a summary of the programs that the township currently has, and two, that staff be directed to work with other relevant agencies such as the Grey Salmon Conservation Authority, Grey County, and an understanding work on invasive species and noxious weeds across the township. And three, that staff be directed to bring forward as part of the budget 2025 budget request to address the invasive species and noxious weeds across the township, and that the request include programs to support private landowners in addressing invasive species and noxious weeds on their properties, such as through subsidized contract services. And four, that staff highlighted in the 2025 budget that staff highlight in the 2025 budget that is allocated towards noxious weeds treatment and recommended a revised budget as may be needed to enable an expanded scope of noxious weed treatment, including the provisions of subsidized treatment options for private landowners. And five, staff be directed as part of the ongoing work on invasive species and noxious weeds to present options for how the township can support private management of invasive species and noxious weeds on private properties. Six, that staff be directed to investigate in partnership, where appropriate, potential external funding sources such as grants that might support this work.
Thank you. I would ask for a mover and seconder. And I would assume Councillor Winters, you would like to move that. And a seconder, Councillor Day. And I will turn it over to you then to speak to this motion.
Thank you. It is a very lengthy motion, and it was actually crafted more from the CAO before he went on holidays. There is, and I have to point out, there is a time in here that him and I are different on. He had 2026 in his original motion, and I prefer 2025. I personally don't want to see it go any longer than it has. I think we've lost traction in the last 4 or 5 years. We are an agricultural based community, and the more that this noxious weeds and different things take effect, it will affect our agricultural community and their ability to export some of their crops. So I envision a program that says we will look after our own properties. We will assist private owners that want to, hopefully through some sort of contracted services that we can secure. And if they don't cooperate, we have the ability to go in and do what we need to do to make sure that the noxious weeds are controlled and that there's a format to put that back on taxes. So it is a big program to do, but I think there's also an education component here that we need to move forward with, bring everybody into the room and keep this moving forward. But time is of the essence. If you've watched the Wild Chervil, we started to gain control. We've lost control. There are hundreds of acres of it now in vacant farm fields. It is still running up and down the roadways, but it's got to be an all or nothing program. To just do our roadways and rely on private properties to do what they need to do without enforcement will not happen.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you for bringing this one forward. It's a really important issue for a variety of reasons, farming, agriculture, and ecologically speaking. I am curious about point number 4, that staff highlight in the 2025 budget that is allocated toward the noxious weeds treatment. All the other sections 1 through 3 and then 5 and 6 talk about invasive species as well. So the not having invasive species in that part that the township is budgeting for and um, providing subsidized treatment options. I'm curious about the justification for that and wondering if it's something we should discuss about putting invasive species into that section as well.
I would recommend that change, and I think that's an oversight. There were a lot of words in here and we kept going back and forth, so I think that's strictly an oversight, and I would propose to put that wording back into that section as well.
Can we see that one as just a friendly amendment to adding the invasive weeds back in there? Councillor Colburn.
I'm happy to see this motion. Over the past 6 years, I've certainly heard from a number of farmers and other folks who have concerns. It seems as though they see us as a municipality doing our part, but without the control on the private properties, it's kind of a losing battle. And so I'm happy to see the 3 or 4 points in here that address that private property issue. What I'm not sure about is tying our hands budget-wise with this motion. Maybe I'm misreading it, but my preference is always to look at the budget process as a whole in order to prioritize what our needs are. And I would just as soon have this as part of the budget discussion rather than tying us to a particular program without the bigger picture context. That would be my suggestion in terms of timelines.
Any comments on that? Councillor Winters.
I really think that's what the CIO was trying to accomplish. And I was trying to keep the dates moving forward, that we tied it up and we didn't let it get on the back burner. So I really see that's kind of how the program's going to unfold. But there's a lot to do before we get to the budget numbers, right? And I see that, but I just didn't want to wait for 2026 or 2025 before we had a report. That's why it's here tonight.
Just one comment. I see 2 phases within this motion. First being the report to fully understand where we are and where we need to get to, with the second being allocation of the money to get to where we need to get to through your 2025 budget. So I think prior to your discussions, you'll have an idea of where we're currently sitting and what the cost impact would be to expand the program or get it back up and running.
I think one thing I would add to that is from the perspective of private landowners, and I'm going to say it's been in the last 10 years that legislation has changed about who can buy the herbicides or whatever is needed to spray on these weeds. And the average homeowner can't do that anymore. So that may well be an aspect of the program where we can help them with that. And that will probably have changed their ability to fight the weeds on their own properties, not being able to get what they needed to do that. And I had another thought going there with that. The other thing is to make this a long-term project, because some of these weeds, if they've gone to seed, and many of these will have on properties that haven't been able to do anything, these seeds are viable for 10 to 15 years. So this isn't a 2 or 3 year project. We need to be looking at this long term as 15 to 20 to be able to eradicate some of these. So I fully support this, and I'm glad Councillor Winters has brought it forward. So is there any other discussion from council on this? Seeing that, Councillor Colburn, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So just to go back to our acting CAO's comment, so we're not tying our hands with this motion then in terms of expenditures for the 2025 budget necessarily, other than staff time and cost to prepare the report and maybe do some educational work, awareness.
All you're doing is directing us to include it in part of your budget discussions for that priority piece. That's all we're doing.
Okay, I will now call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Notice of motion. Does any member wish to provide a notice of motion this evening? Seeing none, we have no closed session. Oh, Councillor Winters?
And I want to cautiously, I know it's notice of motion, notice of direction, or further discussion. It doesn't have to be tonight, but I have actually two items. One is our solid waste collection contract that currently exists. I think on a regular basis, we as council members are inundated with, mechanical breakdowns, missed garbage collection, that sort of stuff. So my comment back is, should we be considering a letter from council to our waste collection contractor about what we're seeing, what we're concerned about, and we would like to see this. I know we're not the only municipality seeing the same issues with the same collection contractor. So that's something that I think might not hurt coming forward from council. Just a discussion for tonight. We can bring back. I'm happy with that. Don't need an answer tonight, but it's something I think should be. And the other one, I was just wondering about a future meeting in the near future. If we can get an update on our discussions with our neighbor regarding some water extension into Georgian Bluffs. We're almost 2 years into our term. This was a big issue 2 years ago, and I feel like it's kind of gone stale. I think we need to bring back an update of where do we sit with this? Where are we going with the Potawatomi water system? It's just, again, just some things in the near future I think should come back.
Thank you for those. Councillor Day?
If I might build on to what Councillor Winters requested, I believe, if I remember correctly, we once talked about approaching the municipality of Owen Sound about extending the bus service. And I was wondering if we could get an update on that as well. That question recently came my way.
Okay, are these going to be taken as notice of motions or just record? Okay, very good. So if there are no other items, then we will move on to the confirming bylaw. And the recommendation that bylaw number 2024-043, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on July 17th, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Day. There's no further discussion. I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. We are now, that is received. Sorry. Now I need somebody to move adjournment after I say when the next meetings are. Committee of the Whole, September 4th at 5 p.m. Council, September 11th at 5 p.m. There's no further business. I will now call for adjournment of this meeting. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Winters, Councillor Day, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ryan.